We won't be needing you to come in tomorrow. He gave me a disinterested glance. What do you mean? Is there some sort of new holiday? My boss was a real prick, so I liked to push his buttons whenever I could. Look, you're fired, all right? Why do you always have to be such a smartass? This had been a long time coming, but the news still hit me like a ton of bricks. Really? That's why you're firing me? He sighed. If you want to know the truth, we have some guys lined up that'll do your job cheaper, faster, and with a smile. Whatever, I hope this whole mill burns down, I yelled as I stormed out of his office. Burning bridges wasn't enough for me. I like to go the extra mile with my spite. It was no secret that I hated my former job, especially to my parents. I was living with them at the time, and they weren't exactly thrilled with the news that I had been fired. I couldn't afford to move out, but my dad said I had 2 weeks until I was on my own. Look, son, all you have to do is pick yourself up by your bootstraps like I did. But you got to work on your dad's ranch most of your life. Then you sold it so you could retire. Now you have 1 week. Outside of lumber mills and ranches, a small town near the Rocky Mountains doesn't provide many job opportunities. I guess that isn't unheard of in this economy. With little time to apply anywhere, I decided to try doing gig work. The first company I applied to, I picked at random. The name rhymes with poor cash. I had no idea how fateful this choice would be. Now, a 15-year-old rust bucket with a busted side mirror doesn't sound like a reliable car, but luckily they don't check your car's roadworthiness when you apply. Just an ID scan, face scan, and background check, and you're good to go. At least I didn't have to pass a drug test. Miraculously, I was able to keep my nose clean despite smoking enough joints to warrant a climate accord. Going to high school with the sheriff's son has its advantages. I swore that little baggie was my designated driver's. I was approved to begin work by the time I woke up the next morning. My first few days were rough, just getting the hang of everything. I quickly learned that most people live far away from town, and they don't like to tip. Not to mention that gas isn't exactly cheap out here in the boonies. Offers of $2 for 10 miles aren't exactly appealing. The first couple of days, I was able to make about $50 a day working 10 hours. To be honest, I was just about to give up and offer my kidney to the manager down at the nearest taco joint. Then, it happened. Ding ding. Go to Burger Bros, 25 miles, $25. Now, I binge-watched videos before I started doing this, and one thing they said is that $2 for every 1 mile traveled is a good offer. But those people usually work in New York City, and I work in the middle of nowhere. I had never seen an offer in the double digits myself. I could make half my average day's pay with one order. Of course, I jumped at the opportunity. I really wish I hadn't. With my current situation, this seemed too good to be true. That's when I noticed the first of many strange aspects of the order. I honestly should have canceled right there. The customer had a strange name. Sometimes people like to order on their partner's account. So you pick up an order with a woman's name, and then their husband answers the door. However, this was different. Instead of being John Smith or John S., the name was Best Friend. My initial reaction was, best friend indeed with what you're paying me. But in hindsight, it was such an obvious alias for something sinister. Little did I know how bad things would get. Then the second strange thing. The order was for only one menu item, an order of small fries. Was that really it? Would someone really pay that much for such a small order? Even for the brief time I had been doing this, I know that people don't usually pay that much for some fries. My scam alarm was going off. Then I thought about it. Even if they canceled, I was guaranteed half of the offer. I still decided to take the risk. And besides, who was I to question what someone wanted to pay for food, as long as I was being paid enough? I had already delivered an order to someone for a burger and 7 cookies, and they only paid me $4. Different people have strange taste and poor judgment with money. The small order was done when I arrived at the restaurant, so I raced in and out so I could start driving. Looking at the GPS route, I would have to take a zigzag pattern of farm roads to make it to my destination. This wasn't necessarily a bad thing, but a highway would have been much easier and faster. I took one of the main roads out of town for about 10 minutes until I had to turn off. The asphalt immediately began crumbling. Before long, it turned to gravel. Despite the road, the drive was actually quite beautiful. It was still early in the summer, so the grass was still lush, green, and dotted with flowers. Farmhouses dotted the landscape. The mountain ridge framed the view. I wondered what the people out here did for a living, be it growing crops or raising livestock. It must be nice to own that much acreage, or even a house. The further away from town I drove, the less farms I saw. Some houses were broken down, some fields left abandoned to fallow. More trees began to appear as if nature was beginning to reclaim the land. Having my crappy car break down out here would really suck. I tried to remember the last time I changed the car battery. My phone signal was starting to fade out too. Being so far from civilization, this didn't surprise me, but a bad cell signal can make the app act funny. I continued to make turn after turn while my 90s grunge playlist blasted through the speakers. I began to realize that my time estimate was off. This was going to take a lot longer than I thought. To make matters worse, I was getting hungry. So I took a couple of fries from the order. It was fine, they wouldn't notice. Finally, I saw that I only had a couple of miles left. The sky had grown darker, but I didn't remember seeing rain in the weather forecast. Trees lined the road. All of a sudden, I appeared to be driving through a forest. I thought all this land had been cleared for at least a century. The little dot representing my car began to lag on my GPS app. I saw that I didn't need to make any more turns, so I just turned it off. Then I realized that I had forgotten something. I was in such a rush that I had forgotten to see if the customer had left any instructions, so I checked. It turns out that they had, but the message they left was very disturbing. It read, "Drop off by the fence gate. For the dog. Tell no one about this order." Now, I've seen a lot of strange requests online from other drivers. Reminders for items that hadn't been ordered or drop-offs in places that didn't exist. The best were very specific, like "don't back out of neighboring driveways" and "we are not a post office," implying that mistakes had been made. However, I was really green at this point and hadn't seen anything out of the ordinary myself. And I had certainly never heard of anyone ordering fast food for their dog. More troubling than the fact that I was facilitating a poor canine diet was the veiled threat. Why so secretive? Were they ashamed to be feeding their dog fried junk? But what did I care? I was getting paid good money to do this. As long as I had permission to be on their property, then I'd do whatever they wanted. My car kicked up dust as I pulled into a narrow gravel driveway. "You have arrived at your destination." I was shocked by what I found. It was an old, junky trailer flanked by a high-fenced backyard surrounded by dense forest. The siding was caked with dirt and mold. One window was broken. No lights were on. Did people actually live like this? Despite how meager it was, I did notice security cameras at the front door and the two corners of the fence. This wasn't an uncommon sight for me. It seemed like almost every house these days had some, but I hadn't seen this much tech on a trailer before. I grabbed a single bag of food and slowly walked towards the trailer. The air was eerily quiet. There was no sound of livestock. A gentle breeze blew by, rustling the leaves of the trees. The metal mesh storm door on the front began to sway, and I jumped. I could have sworn that I saw someone coming out of the trailer. I got goosebumps all along my arms. I walked towards the side of the trailer, coming closer to the corner camera. That was when I noticed one peculiar thing. Normally, a gate would be next to the dwelling. However, I didn't see a gate on the front side of the fence. I don't know why I didn't notice the missing gate before. This would mean that I would have to follow the fence all the way around until I found the gate. Given this proposition, a memory from my brief job orientation flashed in my mind. For your safety, never go inside a customer's house or backyard. I shrugged away the thought. If I was only going around the perimeter, then I wasn't technically going into the yard. As I began walking around the fence, I made another observation. The fence was even taller than it appeared from the street, and the top was lined with barbed wire. It seemed excessive for a home all the way out here. Could it be protection from wolves or something? Last I heard, they were nearly extinct in this area. Perhaps a fence wasn't for keeping something out, but for keeping something in. I finally found the gate on the backside of the yard, the furthest distance from the trailer. This seemed like a really inconvenient place for a gate. The owners would probably go into the backyard directly from the trailer, so why bother with a gate at all? Perhaps it was for access to the surrounding dark forest. The gate was shorter than the typical height, with a heavy padlock sealed tight. Above the gate there was a solid wooden section matching the rest of the fence, topped with barbed wire. I would have to duck my head if I were to go through. There was about 1 foot of clearance between the gate and the upper fence section, right about at my eye level. The gap was just big enough to shove through a bag of fast food. I didn't see a dog at first, so I took a moment to scan the backyard. There was a big dog cage and a small shed along with large piles of car parts. Also, some large rounded rectangular shapes covered in blue tarps. I always like to guess what job a customer did when I delivered to them. I assumed this person was an auto mechanic. Maybe he makes just enough money to spoil his dog, I thought. Suddenly, I heard a heavy panting, followed by claws scraping the dirt. The animal that emerged from behind the shed appeared to be a husky. I say appeared because that's the closest dog comparison I can think of. The dog had such striking blue eyes and shaggy fur, but the fur was a solid dark brown. Upon closer inspection, the proportions of the dog just seemed wrong. Despite being a puppy, it had a large head, long fangs, and an overall bulkier body. This dog looked more like a wolf. I was so caught up admiring the animal that I was surprised when it lunged at the fence and almost knocked me on my ass. "Whoa, you're a strong little fella, aren't you?" The dog just stared at me with an intensity I had not experienced with other dogs before. I didn't want to test the strength of the gate. Here you go, buddy," I said as I shoved the bag of food through the gap. The dog pounced at the bag, tearing it to shreds and scattering french fries all over the yard. I was just glad that the bag wasn't me. With my task now finished, I made the long trek back around the fence, being sure to wave up at the security camera. With all the cameras, heavy-duty fence, and a hulking attack dog, this person seemed like one of those home security freaks. I couldn't imagine that there were really that many break-ins out here, but that wasn't my problem. I would probably never deliver to this strange trailer again, I thought. Once I was back in my car, I hit order complete. I was about halfway back to town when I received a notification. Customer sent a message. "Thanks for coming out so far. Here's a little something extra for your troubles." Another notification pops up on my phone. "The customer sent you an extra $75 tip. Great job." I was stunned. I had to do a double take. $100 for one order? It was incredible. On second thought, maybe it wouldn't be so bad to return to that dirty trailer. I quickly messaged back, "No problem, thanks so much. I hope you order again," along with a laughing emoji. They replied almost immediately, "Don't worry, we will." Anytime I wasn't delivering had been spent looking for an apartment. With this crazy order, I was able to afford the deposit and first month's rent. It was just a one-bedroom, but calling it an apartment was being generous. It was basically a converted attic space above a deli. I had to go downstairs to take a dump, and I had to go to the gym to shower, but it wasn't all bad. If the deli was busy, I could even pick up orders right downstairs. The deli owner was a nice old Italian guy. He took pity on me sometimes and would give me leftover scraps to eat. With housing secured, my life was pretty much the same routine the next couple of weeks. Try to make $50 a day and pray that I get that $100 order again. I had already gotten repeat orders before, so I hoped that this one would be the same, but sadly, it wasn't happening. I was barely making $40 daily, and the offer just wasn't coming in. I found myself desperate for that offer, praying that I would get it, and I hadn't done that since Sunday school in the 2nd grade. Soon I found myself with rent due the following day, and I was still short. Then, it finally happened. Ding ding, go to Burger Bros, 25 miles, $25. This was it. I peeled out of that parking lot like a bat out of hell. I could be even more efficient this time since I was already familiar with the route. However, as I was driving, I noticed something odd. The order had the same name, same menu item, and same message, but the address was different. Not only was it different, it was on a completely different side of town. So this guy owned 2 properties? I took back what I said about him being a lowly mechanic. After another long drive, I pull up to the second address. The setup was very similar. Old ratty trailer, high security, and assumedly a mutated mutt in the backyard. As nice as it must have been to own 2 properties, I couldn't help but wonder why. I know I was just supposed to do my job, accept offer, pick up food, deliver food, repeat. Thinking too much is one of the reasons I got fired from my last job, but this whole situation was very strange. I go around to the back gate and look inside. This time, I see a hulking husky curled up on the ground in the middle of the yard. It looked to be a similar age to Fido. Yeah, I decided to name the last dog just for fun. Then the dog began sniffing the air, roused from sleep. It had detected my presence. As the dog stood, I can tell that this one was a female. She had bright green eyes and a gray, almost blonde-colored coat. It was one of the most beautiful creatures I'd ever seen in my life. Then I remembered Fido, so I braced myself for the upcoming lunge, but it never came. Instead, the dog walked towards me very meekly. She sounded like she was whimpering. I was taken aback. She looked into my eyes with a deep sadness. I almost wanted to cry. I looked the dog over for signs of abuse, but there were none. No scarring or caked blood. Sadly, there was nothing I could do. A crying dog alone didn't warrant any kind of investigation. "Aw, here you go, puppy. Enjoy," I said as I gently slid through the food. The dog nudged the bag with his nose, then walked back and laid on the ground where I found her. I had a bad feeling about these orders, but I still couldn't put my finger on what was going on. Were these dogs being illegally bred, or were they being raised to fight in an illegal dogfighting ring? I really didn't want to get involved in someone else's business, but I knew that I had to do something. I just needed more time to figure things out. In the meantime, I was more than happy to take their money. This order with Bella, that's what I decided to name her, bagged me another $100. This arrangement carried on for another couple of months, where I alternated orders between the 2 sites. The orders also changed. It had started with an order of fries each, then it was 1 hamburger each, then 2 each, and so on. By the final week, I had delivered 4 burger meals to both dogs. This change in diet was reflected in their appearance too. Both dogs had nearly doubled in size since I had first seen them. I researched the largest dog breeds, and the Mastiff seemed to be the heaviest, but that wasn't a good comparison. Besides, Huskies aren't supposed to grow to be that big anyway. But most importantly, how the hell did those dogs grow so quickly? Both dogs changed in demeanor as well. Fido became much more aggressive. I would see him pace around the yard, barking wildly as I approached. Then he would take off in a sprint towards the food. I suppose this wasn't a radical change in behavior, more like a change in intensity. With Fido, I knew what to expect. Bella, on the other hand, was more of a wild card. She was the one that scared me the most. Bella wasn't aggressive. Rather, she appeared to be more on edge, like she could snap at any moment. She would stay completely quiet. As I would walk around the fence, I would assume that she was asleep like the first time I encountered her. But she wasn't. She never was. She always knew when I was approaching. When I was finally in view, she would just watch me. Upon seeing the food, she would get this sort of crazed look in her eyes. Then she would arch her back, sort of like a cat's, and quickly scurry over to me. The movement was so unlike a normal dog's. She moved more like a spider. By this point, I was getting freaked out. With all the money that I had been making, I had actually managed to save. The pay wasn't enough to motivate me anymore. Despite this, I still couldn't stop. That is, until things went a step too far. Best friend ordered once again, but the order was for a single order of fries like the first time. And this time, it was to a new address. Did he get a new dog? I was on high alert. I considered canceling the order, but this could be my chance for a breakthrough. I still wanted to get to the bottom of this. I pulled up to a familiar trailer setup. As I began walking towards the fence as usual, I hear the front door creak. This time, it wasn't my imagination. A tall man stepped out from the trailer. He had long fair hair and an equally long beard. I froze. Handing an order to a customer is by no means out of the ordinary, but I had grown so accustomed to delivering to dogs that interacting with another human had become awkward. It didn't help that this man was quite strange himself. The man began to walk towards me. He didn't say anything, so I tried to break the ice. Hello? It's nice to finally meet you, sir." As he got closer, I saw that he had a claw mark on the side of his face. I really hoped that it wouldn't end up on the evening news. The man looks me up and down like he wants to skin me alive. Then he attempts an impression of a normal person. "Oh, yes, you've been very helpful. I just wanted to come out and thank you personally for all of your hard work." I wasn't sure if he was being sincere or not, so I just said, "No need to thank me. I was just doing my job." I have been wondering, though, why do you feed your dogs fast food? Aren't you worried that they'll get fat? I wanted to slap myself for blurting out something so stupid. To my relief, he started chuckling. "With all the meat these dogs eat, sometimes we like to spoil them with a treat." There was nothing particularly strange about what he said, but it was the way he said it that sent a shiver down my spine. It didn't help that he kept feverishly scratching his beard while he was talking to me, almost as if he had fleas himself. The man continued, "So, do you like my dogs?" Sure. I mean, they're really beautiful. Are they some kind of husky breed?" He paused for a moment. "No, they're a special breed. You know, you've been doing such a great job lately. We think you would make a perfect candidate." Candidate for what exactly, I wondered. For a job? If that was the case, then this was the most effed up job interview ever. He gestured towards the trailer. "You want to see the dogs up close? Come on in." I was starting to freak out at this point. There was no way in hell I was willingly going anywhere with this guy. "Hey, I would love to, but I gotta get to the next one. See ya." Before he could say anything else, I shoved the bag of food into his hands and sprinted back to my car. Suffice it to say, I did not get the extra $75 tip. Has anyone else encountered something like this working in food delivery in the northwestern United States? At this point, I still have no idea what that weird guy was up to. Maybe I never will. All I know is, I hope I never get an order from a customer named Best Friend again. Thank you for listening. For more content like this, please be sure to subscribe, and remember, nothing's lost forever.